children's videos.
Ow! Exclaimed Percy.
So join Thomas, Percy, James, Toby, Gordon, and the Fat Controller for lots of Thomas the Tank Engine adventures. From trains to canal.
Amber, do we have to watch these adverts? Can't we just skip them?
No, it's about when the main feature replaces them.
The Ragdoll with John, Jim, and of course Rosie as they cruise into
You know, does anyone actually watch these shows that they advertise on VHS?
Oh,
I do.
Well, yes, I know you do, but does anyone else? Like, did you watch these shows?
They meet all sorts of...
No?
I thought so.
Now don't get me wrong, it is important to advertise other stuff on VHS, but if you're advertising something like Rosie and Jim or Tots TV on a Thomas the Tank Engine VHS, kids are not going to be interested as they're just going to probably just skip to the main feature. But have you ever considered sitting down and watching one of these shows just out of curiosity's sake? Well, this happened to me with one show called the Raggy Dolls.
Did someone mention Raggy Dolls?
No, what are you doing here? Get out!
Oh. And I took that personally. Really?
Yes, Nick. We're talking about the Raggy Dolls. We were just about to watch some episodes.
What? But I just put in a Thomas VHS!
Well, isn't that a coincidence? Because I have all the DVDs at my disposal.
What is wrong with your hands?
I don't know, it's a medical condition, I can't stop it. Anyway, enough about you. Come on in, boys, let's go!
Boys? What do you mean by How the fuck did you find my house? Well, I'm going to be completely honest and say that prior to this review, I have never seen this show at all. My only exposure to the Raggy Dolls was from the Castle Vision promo and all the Tugs VHSs.
Also on the Castle Vision label, the Raggy Dolls.
I might have seen the name around when I was little, but I don't remember watching the show until January 2018. I can't even remember how I found it. I think it was on YouTube. I found the later season's art style really sweet and it was on the same line as cartoons as Will-O-the-Wisp, Bod, Crystal Tips and Alistair and other standard 2D cartoons of its time.
Much like Amber, I have no clue how I came across the Raggy Dolls. I don't even remember the advert on the Tugs tapes if I'm honest, but for some odd reason, it just came into existence and I knew what it was. Because I knew the theme song, I even had the piano sheet music for it, and much later in my teens when Tiny Pop began showing it, I just instantly recognised it and would secretly watch it so no one would judge me. Much like all the other shows I watched growing up. The Raggy Dolls were just kinda there really, you know?
Well, I guess we're gonna have to band together then and take a look at this thing of a show. This is the Raggy Dolls. The Raggy Dolls is a British cartoon series created by Melvin Jacobson and was written, composed and narrated by the one man, Neil Innes. Yeah, despite Jacobson creating the show, it seems that Innes did everything else. Though luckily this didn't seem to result in any arguments. Though it would be kind of funny if the real reason they stopped making the show was because Neil was getting all the credit for it.
Ah, that's it! Come on, guys!
Ow! Whoa, team! Where are you going?
We quit, Mr. One-Man Show!
Freaking idiot!
This show was first broadcast on CITV in 1986 and surprisingly lasted until 1994. So basically, in the time gap of Jimbo and the Jet Set on Budgie Little Helicopter, you had the Raggy Dolls.
Now you're probably wondering to yourself, considering the length of the series' run and its level of obscurity, how many seasons did the Raggy Dolls actually have? If we look at examples of well-known shows such as the Woodland Animations Postman Pat having 2 seasons and Bumper Films Fireman Sam having 4, you'd believe it would have run for a similar length between those numbers, correct? Well, you're wrong. It lasted for a staggering 9 seasons with 112 goddamn episodes.
What?!
But despite this long list of episodes, a lot of them are actually counted as lost media, as only season 1 to 4 were released on DVD and only 3 VHSs were made available for both UK and Australian markets. The only way people have got access to this long list of lost episodes is through the odd TV recordings during the original airings, but even then season 5 and 6 are completely lost, barring one season 6 episode which is in Icelandic, and spoilers, I don't speak it.
Það búa svo margir í Lundúnum að einhver hlýtur að koma auga á okkur. Við notum bara þulurnar sem happadísin kenndi okkur og verðum ósýnileg.
What is even stranger though is the fact that on the Australian releases, half of season 8 and all of season 9 were released instead of the first 4, creating what we call the chuckle effect.
What's the chuckle effect?
Well, I'm glad you asked.
Dude, you know we could just enter the Starwind zone, right?
Actually, yeah, that sounds much easier.
Well, that was easy.
The chuckle effect is when a TV show has a numerous amount of episodes made, but is very limited in terms of distribution/home media releases, with a few episodes being released on VHS and DVD, and the others only sourced by TV airings. So this isn't a case like Julia Jekyll and Harriet Hyde, where the whole show didn't even receive a home media release, and it's only by pure luck that all the episodes have been sourced by either TV recordings or torrent sites. The reason it's called the chuckle effect is because of, surprise surprise, Chucklevision. Because despite having nearly 300 episodes made for the show, only a few seasons were made on DVD, and believe it or not, there was only one official VHS of the show. The rest is all just TV recordings. This effect can also apply to shows like Dream Street, the later episodes of Sooty & Co, and of course, the Raggy Dolls. What we do know is that the entire show is still in the hands of ITV. In fact, I actually sent them an email about my concerns of the missing episodes. This is what they said to me in response.
Hi Gianluca, thank you for your email regarding obtaining a copy of Raggy Dolls Season 5 and 6. I'm happy to know that you enjoyed the show enough to want to gain a copy. I have forwarded your email to our Viewers Request Department, who will advise on availability and costs. Provided this is for your own personal education use, it is sometimes possible for us to provide viewers with one-off copies of programs which have not been released commercially.
I do have a friend who used to have the master tapes of series 7 to 9 except for episode 1 of season 7, but unfortunately that archive link has expired and I only saved 5 episodes, and as of the time I'm recording this, 2 of them have not surfaced online, and 1 being in significantly better quality than this other YouTube upload. Which raises the question, why did they make that many episodes of Raggy Dolls when the show got barely any attention? Bob the Builder had nearly the same amount of episodes, but the reason that kept on going was despite every episode being the same, it carried on because it was successful. But Raggy Dolls? Was there like a great demand for the show or something? Were people turning up to work and saying,
"Oh man, did you see the new Raggy Dolls episode? Oh yeah, that one was like really spoke to me.
It broke new ground!
I bet you it's not on any top 10 80s kids shows from Britain list online. In fact, I dare you to do that. Pause this video and search for an article, top 10 80s British kids shows or whatever, and I'm guaranteed you won't find Raggy Dolls on it. Go on, do it. We'll still be here. And if I'm wrong, then cool.
So this is where I ask you, the audience, to help out on the quest for the lost episodes. In the description of this video are 30 episodes. These are all of the missing episodes of the Raggy Dolls I'm on the hunt for. So if you know anyone who has a TV torrent, or anyone that has these episodes, or if you have these episodes, please get in contact with me through my Twitter, or leave a comment on this community post with a Google Drive, or something like that, containing those episodes. That would be greatly appreciated.
Okay, I'm starting to get a headache.
You want to leave my domain? And all this purple?
Yes, because there is a coach literally floating right towards us. Ugh. Right, where were we? Oh yeah, production on the Raggy Dolls.
The animation style was based on the designs from Steve Smallman, and the show was distributed by Yorkshire Television and done by them for the first 2 seasons, which was headed by Roy Evans. It was later given to Orchard Productions for the remaining 100 or so episodes. Orchard was headed by Mark Mason from season 3 to 6, and Peter Hale from season 7 until the end of the show's run. And when you watch this era of the show, you can immediately pick up the glow up in animation and be able to distinguish which era is which. But none of those styles compare to the intro and credits. And if you thought Jimbo had the budget of a ham sandwich, then this had the budget of a deluxe burger.
With cheese, Mr. Squidward, with cheese.
Honestly, these designs almost seem like there was a pilot made for the show. Sad Sack changes his design between the two from having bubble eyes to becoming a fat lard. Oh yeah, and they have teeth in the first episode despite them clearly not having any in the later series' original sketches. According to Neil Innes, the animation for the show was actually really limited.
You have to remember it was done with very kind of limited kind of animation. It's an awful lot of hanging about, really. It's not crash bang wallop animation, but I think it's kind of gentler on the eye in many ways. And the lighting, I think they got the lighting really well.
The way Orchard changed the designs of the Raggy Dolls from season 3 onwards kinda makes the faces look a bit like the cartoon illustrations of Fireman Sam from the 90s. Now, John Luca actually reached out to Mark Mason on Instagram and asked him about the locations of season 5 and 6 as well as the production of the show, and this is what he had to say.
Hello John Luca, and thank you for your message. Unfortunately, I don't have any of the episodes from series 5 and 6. The compilation you mentioned was edited together quickly at the end of series 6. I think. When the crew were made redundant at Orchard Productions, I made it as a way of saying thanks to all the hard-working staff who lost their jobs. Some of them got their jobs back when Series 7 was commissioned, but I moved on to animate and direct other children's shows. We were a small team, myself, storyboards, layout and animation, an in-betweener, background artist, 2 inkers and 2 or 3 cel painters. It was shot on 16mm film. We were mainly all in one room. It was good fun, but extremely hard work. Storyboards and layouts were done in 2 weeks, and the animation was done in another 2 weeks. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, if I can remember.
Now, the show's episode distribution has a sort of similar form to how the episodes of something like the original Bob the Builder were put on TV. While new episodes were being aired, new episodes were being made.
As stated before, the narration and voices were done by the late Neil Innes, but not only that, he also composed the music for the show and also that amazing theme song.
Which may I add that the full 3-minute variant of this theme fucking slaps.
It's the Raggy Dolls, dolls like you and me. Raggy Dolls, made them perfectly.
Neil Innes' performance is similar to the voice works of other actors such as Ken Barry, John Alderton and Michael Hordern, as he gives each character their own distinct voice and personality.
That stick's a bit big, isn't it?
It's not a stick, it's a putter.
Don't be like that, mon ami. We will do whatever you want to do. Anyway, whatever it is, it's none of our business. Let's find the things we need.
Sad Sack yawned a big yawn.
When doing some research into Neil Innes, we found out that...
I'm sorry, you mean I found out.
Okay, fine. You found out that Neil has rather extensive music career, including collaborating with the Monty Pythons with songs such as The Knights of the Round Table from the Holy Grail, and even making an appearance in the final series of Flying Circus in 1974.
We stated that the show didn't really get that much attention, but it isn't to say that this show didn't reach out to other countries, because it certainly did, with one of the more popular ones being Australia. The series frequently aired on ABC for kids, and the characters were popular enough to warrant their own knitting tutorials as well as making a cake of Princess.
Oh, are you having cake?
Merchandise was made for the show, with most of them being books based off the episodes of the TV show. I own 2 of them. Yes, they did make dolls of the characters, but they're really hard to come across on eBay, and when they do, they're really expensive. I'm sorry, how much? But what I find most interesting about this show is that there's a lot of misconceptions that people make with this. For example, IMDb states that there are 11 seasons instead of 9, as well as stating the episodes are 5 minutes long instead of 10.
Bullshit.
On the Lost Media Wiki, there's a statement that says that there is a lost US dub of the show, despite the Wikipedia article saying that this show reached out to a lot of countries except for the United States.
Bullshit. Oh, hello.
So long story short, this show was really speckled in terms of production and distribution, but did that carry over to the show itself? But first, a word from our sponsor.
Do you like the movie Cars? Do you like reanimated collabs? Then Cars Retold is the project for you. In this reanimated collab of the first movie, you can animate, voice act, and even sing. So, join the Discord server linked in the description.
Ka-chow!
Please note, you must be 16 years or older to join the server. If you wish to be involved but do not enter the Discord, message us on Twitter at CarsToad. Our DMs and claiming for clips are open.
Now, we spent a good time chatting about the production of this, but we haven't actually discussed the whole premise. The Raggy Dolls takes place at a toy factory headed by Mr. Oswald Grimes, often referred to as Ozzy. He's the manager of the factory, who has a certain disdain towards the Raggy Dolls. He makes sure that every toy that comes out of his factory is perfect, and if something goes wrong, it goes straight into the reject bin.
Right, I want to have a word about these princess dolls. Okay, sir. Why the hell do they keep turning out like this? Well, sir, the machine keeps shredding the dresses and cutting the hair too short. What the fuck are you talking about? These rejects are completely bloody different dolls, man. There's no resemblance. Now, I suggest you stop fucking about and get this shit sorted, or I'll sack the bloody lot of you. We've lost 112 dolls this way over the past 8 years, and I'm getting bloody sick of it.
Now, that isn't to say that he doesn't have a soft side, because he definitely does.
He was a very quiet and patient man, actually. He got a lot done. I don't think the Raggy Dolls would have been anything like as good with it were it not for his, deft and patient touch.
Now, if you're wondering why Mr. Grimes looks like a discount Mr. Bean, even though when I first saw it, I thought he looked like Ronald Reagan from Smiling Friends.
Well, I don't know what that peanut or that fellow over there is saying, but I believe you should try to win back the marketplace with a more competitive business model.
That's because he's based off the looks of the executive producer John Marsden. Well, at least that's what Neil Innes says, because just like the majority of the other production members, we don't have any photos for evidence.
No, but Mr. Grimes actually looks like John Marsden, the executive producer, so that was the animator's joke there.
But back to the show itself, it follows the daily adventures of 7 Raggy Dolls, who are considered rejected toys due to their different faults.
See one little scratch on them and they stamp them reject, like...
Which begs the question, why don't they get a professional round to fix up all the dolls?
Oh, it's amazing! You're a genius! He's just like new! No! His arm! Where's his arm? Oh, no!
Raggy Dolls, Raggy Dolls.
Now, the standout thing about Raggy Dolls is that it doesn't necessarily focus on one particular doll, but rather the whole cast of dolls. Trying to find a similar show is actually quite difficult because when a show has an ensemble cast of characters, there's always one particular main character. I guess the closest would be Tugs, but even then Tencent would probably be regarded as the main character. But back to the Raggy Dolls, this show features the cast of 7 dolls. Lucy, Back to Front, Hi-Fi, Dottie, Claude, Princess, and Sad Sack. So first off, there's the doll who we see in the intro, Princess. She is the youngest of the Raggy Dolls, in the sense that she is the latest addition to the reject bin. The reason she's classified as a reject is because she was supposed to be a princess doll like this.
Nick, what are you doing?
I'm showing you what Princess was supposed to be.
But you're just wearing your... Oh, shit, yeah. Your blue sissy dress looks identical to the actual princess doll. I see.
Exactly.
But in the show, Princess actually has 2 different reasons of why she's a reject. In season 1, she claims that the machine ran out of material when making her.
They ran out of material when they were making me.
But in a later episode from season 9, she counterclaims that and says that the machine tore her dress apart and cut her hair.
But the machine tore my dress and cut my hair.
I can understand where the confusion came from, as these episodes do have an 8-year time gap, so the writers must have forgotten the original reason. In terms of her character, Princess is probably the most generous of the dolls. This is apparent in 2 episodes, Happy Bin Day and The Royal Tour. Happy Bin Day is also the episode where we learn the order of when the dolls arrived in the reject bin. In both these episodes, she's treated with kind offers from the others, but she always wishes to return the favour. Princess actually has a little bit of a speaking difficulty, but it's nowhere near on the same levels as Hi-Fi. In her case, she always pronounces her H's in her words.
I don't know why I'm called Princess. I don't look royal at all. I look just like everyone else. I've just spoken to Claude and Sad Sack. Is there anything I can do to help? What are we going to do with all this chocolate? Harbour.
Tree is arbor, not harbour.
Oh dear. How difficult.
And don't drop your H's.
Second in line is Lucy, literally the best female Raggy Doll in my opinion. I'm extremely biased. Being a northerner myself, I can heavily relate to her. Lucy is the 4th Raggy doll. She's considered a reject because she has loose limbs, hence why she's called Lucy. She's the most timid of the Raggy dolls, and when she gets all scared, her knees start knocking. Which, fun fact, to make that exact sound, all you need is an empty glass and a solid object.
Stop that noise!
One of the best episodes centred around her is Ghosts, which may be your typical ghost story that's been done in quite a lot of kids' shows, but we get to learn a lot about Lucy, like how she wishes to be more brave and not fall to pieces, but she learns that actually falling to pieces isn't too bad after all after successfully scaring the ghost dolls. In later episodes, we learn that she has a thing for gardening and she does her own planting near the factory, but that isn't established until much later in the show. We stan Lucy, an absolute icon.
Up next is Back to Front. He's number 5 of the 7 dolls. It's pretty clear why he's a reject, because it's in his bloody name. They stuck the poor fella's head on the other way around. But even though he has that major flaw, he's probably the most handiest doll of them all. Back to Front is clearly meant to be a handy workman doll, so it makes sense why he's the handiest. He has a big fascination with the technical workings on things, and nowhere is it more evident than in the episode The Old Windmill, where the Raggy Dolls visit a renovated windmill, and when it stops working, it was Back to Front's idea to help fix it. But in a later episode, we learn that he can be rather cheeky, as when the Raggy Dolls were in Crete, Back to Front plays a trick on them, much to the annoyance of the others, especially Dottie.
It was only a joke. That was not funny.
Fuck you, I think it's hilarious. How do you like that?
His common catchphrase is,
"No problem,"
which I find very similar to Scoop's.
"No prob, Bob."
But Back to Front tends to repeat his catchphrase a fair too many times in a couple of episodes, for better or for worse.
Then, after Back to Front, there's Dottie, the 2nd oldest Raggy doll.
Why hasn't he said anything?
I think he forgot to write his part of the script. Anyway.
Hi-Fi was the 3rd doll to join the reject bin. He's a talking doll, but he was considered a reject because his wires were fitted wrong, resulting in him stuttering in his sentences. Hi-Fi is the one who knows what to do when the dolls are in a sticky situation, often stuttering,
"Rubber Raggy Dolls to the rescue!"
I also always thought him and Lucy would go really nicely together. They remind me of brother and sister because of their hair colour and pretty much how similar they are. Apparently, according to an interview with Mark Mason, Hi-Fi was his least favourite character to animate with his striped trousers, and at one stage, he had bad nightmares about him. Trust me, I'd sweat profusely if I woke up and saw him standing there saying, "Come and play with me." No! If there's one thing that doesn't make sense about Hi-Fi, is how does his radio manage to chip in with forces such as the police, the Coast Guard, and even air traffic control? And the fact that he can communicate with them without the humans questioning who the voice belongs to. Is he a part of MI5? MI6? The British Navy?
And after him, we've got Claude.
Wait, I found it!
Jesus Christ! Don't do that!
Dottie is the ringleader of the Raggy Dolls and spends most of her time bossing everyone around, essentially pushing them to become the rescue rangers of the area, as whenever there is trouble, she is booting everyone into position, although a lot of the time leaving Sad Sack to himself, either out of sympathy or it would take too much effort to mobilise him. The reason she is in the bin is because they splattered paint over her during the process, and, much like the other Raggy Dolls, excluding Princess, we never actually see what her finalised version was supposed to look like, coming to the conclusion that there wasn't enough bitch to go around. She's obnoxious, rude, arrogant, overconfident, a pure bossy boots, but that isn't to say she hasn't got her good side. I mean, she doesn't, but we all have to have our expectations ruined somehow. Yeah, I'm finished. Carry on.
Now, the next doll is Claude. Oh boy, I've got a lot to say about him.
Ah, the French.
Now, Claude is probably the most interesting of the Raggy Dolls, but he's also the most annoying one of the bunch. He is the 2nd youngest Raggy Doll behind Princess, but unlike the others, there's absolutely nothing wrong with him. The only reason he's in the reject bin is because he fell out of the box bound for France, hence why he's a French doll. A lot of this is actually explained in the episode The Trouble with Claude, which in that episode we learn why the other dolls are considered rejects. If you can't tell, Claude is very passionate about France, and in later episodes we learn he has quite a knack with cooking. But my biggest problem with him is that he goes on and on about France that it just drives me up the fucking wall. The thing that annoys me about Claude is that sometimes when he mentions France, it's not all that bad. Like in the Trouble with Claude episode, it makes sense. And in that cruise saga in season 9 where they travel around southern Europe, it makes sense for Claude to mention France because Nice and Marseille are around that area. But when he mentions it out of complete nowhere, that's when I have a problem with him, because it wouldn't have any relevance to the situation that the dolls are currently in.
I always wondered why Claude was there in a way.
I wonder, do they by any chance visit La France? I wonder how long it will take to get to France. What else is there?
There is France. In what city in France can you find the Eiffel Tower?
I have heard that on La Russe many people can speak the French très bien.
Like if Claude mentions anything about France in any of the episodes we're reviewing, I'm gonna punch him. I'm not kidding.
But he's not even from France, the feck. He's made in, like, Sheffield.
Wait, why Sheffield? Oh, because it's Yorkshire TV.
Yorkshire, Yorkshire, White Rose, White Rose.
What's he doing?
You should know, you're from the north.
Wait, what?
Oh, Northern lass, is she? Would you care for a rock from Whitby?
No, I'm not even from that part of up north. I'm from Cheshire. Besides, I like exploring the south here.
Southern diet? Them mamby-pamby Nancy's, not proper diet at all.
Says the people who don't know how to pronounce blast, grass, glass, bath, last, and arse.
Them's fighting words, lad.
They ain't fighting words, they're fact.
Come here, you fairy cake.
No, you get here, you plonker.
And last, but by no means least, or in his case, least of all, is Sad Sack, the end result of a drunken night of regrettable sex between Pudsey Bear and Eeyore. Sad Sack is not only the first doll to arrive in the reject room, which explains his pessimism and killjoy nature, but he is also the most unique doll compared to everyone else, as he was a prototype that took too much material to put together, so was quietly cancelled and chucked away. Meaning in collector's terms, he is worth his weight in gold. Negative, depressed, fat, and always complaining, you'd think if he was here today, he'd been complaining on Twitter about why the Doctor shouldn't be a woman.
Well, you didn't even give him one chance.
No, because they'd done it before.
But putting that aside, he has a soft side to him that occasionally comes out in episodes, usually in situations where he avoids learning something, but in the end is forced to learn it anyway, due to the circumstances ahead of it. For example, when Claude is teaching French, he avoids it to sod off somewhere, only to come across a French doll who can't speak English. But when he tries, and everyone in the group feels fondly towards him and in many ways sympathetic to his situation, being one of a kind.
Well, I mean, Sad Sack. I mean, it's a bit of Sad Sack in all of us, really. Gloom merchant and so full of his own misery, doesn't really quite know what he's doing himself.
Those were our main set of characters, but there's quite a few recurring secondary ones. There's Old Edward, Mr. Grimes' old teddy bear, Spud, Pumpernickel, the scarecrow, Florrie Fosdyke, the factory's forgetful canteen lady.
Visually based on Joy Whitby, the executive producer.
Cynthia Popplethwaite, Mr. Grimes' childhood crush, who he actually ends up marrying later in the series.
It was a lady in a silk tracksuit.
Mr. Marmalade, a stray cat that Mr. Grimes had adopted after scaring mice from the factory.
Meow, bitch!
Oz and Boz, Mr. Grimes' twin nephews, who are completely reckless in whatever they do. And finally there's Rupert the Roo, a toy kangaroo, who apparently is the mascot for Qantas. I know the airline isn't specifically said, but still, holy shit!
Alright, save your airplane chat for another day.
Now, Rupert lives at Mr. Grimes' house with Old Edward. I think this might be explained later on, but I think it's from a missing episode. And look, I understand I gave Claude a lot of shit, but Jesus! I think Rupert is probably more annoying than him. At least Claude knows when to shut the fuck up. And yes, I know it's in Rupert's character being all bouncy and shit because he's a kangaroo, but still.
Would you fucking calm the fuck down?
The kangaroo jumped back on top of the table.
Now apparently there's an 8th Raggy Doll, but he's never really shown to be with the other 7 in the reject bin, but he was apparently introduced in season 5. And who is this 8th Raggy Doll, you may ask?
It's Small Moo! If you want Small Moo to be the 8th Raggy Doll, text Small Moo to 112-1986. And if you don't, text no. I really...
No, it's not Small Moo. It's actually a doll named Ragamuffin, a travelling doll who lost his owner, but decided to take up his life travelling the world.
Why does he look like Tom Baker as the 5th Doctor?
Curry sauce all over your anus. Delish.
Before getting into the storylines for the episodes, I just wanted to talk about the minor things in them. First is the music. The show doesn't heavily rely on a full episode score like Thomas. There are a few little music cues in there, with most of them being arrangements of the main theme.
Lucy drew a mushroom house, the kind that fairies are supposed to live in. I'd like to live in a potting shed, said back to front.
But there are some instances where they play music, and I honestly confused it for music that you would hear in an episode of SpongeBob.
They thought of all the things there are to do in London. They saw Big Ben and the Houses of Parliament.
But there's one glaring problem I have with the absence of music, and this more or less applies more to the episodes from seasons 7 to 9.
Raggy Dolls.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about them, but some episodes have a long pause of silence at the end, and then boom! End credits start playing. Were they really trying to meet the 10-minute mark?
Excuse me, boss, but we're just editing the new Raggy Dolls episode, and there's this long gap of silence with no music or dialogue. Do we have to keep it?
Oh yes, it's crucial that gap is right there.
But why? It's not said in the script or anything.
Well, you see, the Raggy Dolls has always kept to a 10-minute runtime, and we need to keep that consistent with every episode. It's really simple when you digest it.
You've got to be taking the piss. You know, I wish being a model maker at Shepperton. I wonder how my tramp steamer model's doing.
Now, we've mentioned Bob the Builder quite a lot, but what if we told you that a lot of the sound effects were actually first heard in the Raggy Dolls? You don't believe us? Well, get a load of this.
Pushed the kangaroo all the way to the big field. Exhausted, not far from the box on the top shelf where they had slept, and crawled along on hands and knees. The air vent seemed to go on for ages. As luck would have it, the factory van was going to the station first thing Monday morning.
With all these sound effects used here before later being in Bob leads us to the conclusion that these sound effects are pretty much stock sounds, or in other words, royalty free.
Woo! It's a royalty-free sound effects! Put them in your reviews, stick them up your ass, do whatever you want, fuck it!
Another thing I feel like I must mention is the angling of the camera. In the early seasons, there's quite a few unsettling close-ups of the characters, as well as reused assets. And the later seasons seem to like using a lot of motion blur. And then there's the occasional scene which is really smoothly animated, which is really weird, especially for a show which has rather rigid animation.
Now, the storylines for each episode are pretty bare bones in simplicity, as most of them are just about the dolls getting up to all sorts of antics outside the factory. But despite most shows' narrative structure of resetting characters and locations every episode, this has a good continuity structure, such as reoccurring characters suited to different places that they visit, objects such as the treehouse in season 3 being used as a clubhouse.
There's a little rejected boat toy that they take from season 2, and in later seasons they keep it for themselves and call it the Spirit of Adventure, not to be confused with the name of Charles Muntsplit from Up.
There's a small saga in season 7 where they visit London and bump into Ragamuffin, but the most prominent one would be the Mediterranean Cruise saga, where Mr. Grimes and Cynthia go on a honeymoon and the Raggy Dolls hitch along for the ride, obviously without being seen, because this world basically has the same logic as Toy Story. Well, sort of.
Now, the reason we mention these here is because the episodes we're looking at don't really seem to follow any of the major continuity or plot points, so if anyone's new to the show, they don't have to search around for previous episodes to catch up on.
Now, of the 112 episodes, with many missing episodes, we've decided to go through 4 episodes, 2 from the old style and 2 from the later style. Our first episode is called The Special Offer from Season 1. In this episode, the Raggy Dolls have accidentally overslept, which meant they have to spend the whole day in the reject bin. But soon, Mr. Grimes arrives with another man as he's showing him round the factory. This man is Mr. Bossy, a toy shop owner, and he decides to take the Raggy Dolls from Mr. Grimes.
So after that, Mr. Bossy puts the Raggy Dolls in his Rolls Royce and drives them to his toy shop in London, where they would go on sale for free in a shop called Belgravia Toys. Which is not a real shop, but Belgravia is a real-life location in London, nestled between Westminster and Knightsbridge. But the catch to the dolls is that they'd only be sold if the customers buy a video game first. Yet, despite how retro-looking this show is, video games do exist already in this universe.
Sadsack would totally be a gamer.
I'll cut off your nutsack and nail it to my door!
In the shop, 2 American customers almost bought Princess, and then the thought struck the dolls.
We could all be bought by different people.
Yes, and then we'd never see each other again.
So to prevent anyone from buying them, the Raggy Dolls pull horrid faces at the customers who don't seem to question it. But when a little girl arrived at the shop, the nasty faces didn't work and she ends up buying Lucy. That night, the dolls set out to plan a rescue for Lucy. Luckily, the little girl was a regular customer at the toy shop and her address is in the logbook. Wait a minute, where's Gianluca?
I'm on my way from misery to happiness today. I'm on my way from misery to happiness today.
I am standing outside of 34 Eaton Terrace Southwest 1.
Hey, what you doing outside my house? You trying to make my kid cry?
But I thought you lived in the US!
Well, you were soon wrong, buddy. I live in London. Now I'm gonna kick your ass.
Oh shit, cut the cameras, cut the cameras.
Where the bloody hell have you been?
You don't want to know. And at this place, the girl, named Mariana Bunch, was playing with Lucy until her arm fell off, which Mariana proceeds to pull Lucy to pieces. Later, the Raggy Dolls find the place on an A to Z map, where they snuck into the house while everyone was asleep. They find Lucy, fix her up, and head back to the shop.
Whilst trying to get back in through the window, Sadsack landed in a bin which obviously left him with a funny smell.
Sale bête, j'aime pas ça moi.
This gives the dolls the idea to jump in the bin themselves so that they smell terrible. In the morning, Mr. Bossy notices the smell and orders for the dolls to be sent back to Mr. Grimes' toy factory, but by the time they got back, the smell had worn off.
And that's the end of the episode. This episode is okay, to say the least. I do like the world building aspect of it being set in London and all. And it's really nice to see that all the dolls care for each other. But my issue is that they want to be treated like actual toys, but they don't want to be sold to different owners. So it kind of defeats the purpose of being sold. Now I can understand that they've formed a connection with one another, but it's still the 5th episode of the 1st season, so we, as an audience, haven't properly got to know what their relationship with each other are like. Also, this episode had a lot of random product placements, particularly with the A to Z map and Rolls-Royce.
I think it's a very unique episode. The fact that they are paired up with video games is insane. One old world meets a modern world. Also, props to them for using an intro scene in the episode, unless the episode was made before the theme song was. I think one aspect of this particular episode is that Mr. Grimes knows that the Raggy Dolls exist, and didn't really care about them. However, when Cynthia Popplethwaite appears on the scene a few seasons later, she takes a liking to the dolls and ultimately convinces poor old Ozzy Grimes that they really are beautiful after all. Character development, people, character development.
Not sure what to make of it myself. Kinda confuses me that they spend all the time complaining about being rejects and never being picked up by anyone. But when the opportunity arises, they decide to screw any chance they have because they came to the conclusion that no one would buy all of them and would pick one based on personal preference. And instead of being happy about one getting out, they all decide to screw their chances. Kinda like how Claude bitches about always wanting to be in France, but once he gets the opportunity to go, he ditches it. But it's very much a Yorkshire Billy Liar trait, where you complain about your misfortunes, but when given the opportunity to make it better, it's too much effort to stop complaining and you'd rather wallow in crap.
Perhaps we can sail to France.
Shut the fuck up about it already.
But anyway, let's move on to our next episode, also in season 1, called The Dark Wood, where the Raggy Dolls decide to go for a walk in nature after Hi-Fi shows them a map of the area surrounding the factory, which includes a place called The Dark Wood. Showing no hesitation to a name like that, the dolls decide to take a picnic, catching the attention of Sadsack naturally and head for the Dark Wood, with Sadsack offering to carry all the supplies because of the sheer mention of a buffet.
The Raggy Dolls made their way to the Dark Wood, leaving Sadsack far behind. A rather nice detail to the wood is how the trees look like they have faces carved into them, but once they enter the Dark Wood, they start to have second thoughts. Suddenly, they heard a wail for help in the distance. It was Sadsack. He nearly got crushed by a sharp and illegal trap. But since he was carrying all the equipment, he was lucky to have not been sliced in half.
Just after freeing Sad Sack, they hear another cry for help. It was a squirrel whose tail got caught and, according to the narration, will never look the same again.
But its tail would never look the same again.
This leads to the Raggy Dolls finding more traps hidden in the wood. After uncovering them all, Back to Front makes them safe. They soon came to the conclusion that a poacher must be doing all of this, which at that moment a flock of injured woodland animals emerge from the woods, and they tell the Raggy Doll what this poacher has done to some of them.
The dolls listened with horror as he told them about all the creatures who'd been caught in traps in the dark wood. A hedgehog, a fox, and 5 field mice who'd been left hanging by their tails.
Jesus Chrysler!
And now you know why I chose this episode.
The animals thought it'd be best to leave the dark wood, but the Raggy Dolls protest and try to form a plan to get rid of the poacher. Back to Front spots Sam Wilkinson near his tent, and Hi-Fi tells the others the plan. He would radio the police and tell them the poacher's location while the others loosened the tent's pegs. The plans worked a treat. Hi-Fi's radio was so loud it woke the poacher with a fright, so much that he landed in one of his own traps catching his beard. At that moment, the constabulary arrive and take him away.
Oh no, the constabulary. You're under arrest.
The episode then concludes with Hi-Fi being congratulated by the group, while Sad Sack is inhaling the entire picnic basket. I think we can all summarise what we feel about this episode, and that it is dark, to say the least, and has many hallmarks to other stories such as Watership Down in terms of its graphic nature. Even if it dressed it up to show that no one is actually dead because it's a children's show during the daytime, but its connotations to real life forms of animal cruelty is a very brave subject to cover, especially as it would be a long while until other shows such as The Animals of Farthing Wood looked at this more closely. It is weird though how Sad Sack just kinda exists in this episode as a form of comic relief, while everyone else is actually doing something about the situation, because he is there to show that there are traps, but then just sits in the background afterwards. Kinda feels like a wasted opportunity, but nevertheless, still a very strong episode.
Oh, trust me, if this was shown 30 years later, it would not go down well. Those 90s kids who suffered at the hands of the Animals of Farthingwood would be scarred, and so would their children, and their grandchildren. With the incidents of Sad Sack nearly being cut in half by a poacher trap, the animals hanging from the tree with painful noises, the squirrel having its tail trapped in another one of those poacher traps, I really have no words. I mean, this was 1986, they'd get away with anything, and I'm not complaining. I'm just taken aback by this episode, but not surprised in the slightest.
Fucking hell, what an episode! One aspect I like about this episode is how it shows that the show is not afraid to play with its tone. As you saw from those hanging animals, there is a really heavy implication of death and animal cruelty. And it does contain a strong message about being careful in certain areas and respecting the wildlife around you. My only bugbear with this episode is that we don't see the injured animals again after they tell the Raggy Dolls about the poacher, but overall a really solid episode.
What did you do? I turned off the wall. Wait, didn't you turn off the whole movie? I must have pressed the wrong button. Well, put it back on. Put the movie back on. Yes, sir.
There we go.
Hey guys, it's me.
Jesus!
Smoothly.
What about me? I could add something to the review.
Like what?
I could share my thoughts on the other TV shows from the VHS, like Thomas, Foreskin Farm, Tugs, Tumble Down Fart, Limited Edition, Special Edition of Star Wars The Phantom Menace, Mrs. Doubtfire.
Ah, fantastic. What are they like?
They're all shit.
Okay, but aren't you gonna fix my TV? You are a repairman.
Oh yeah. Now that'll be £600.
We don't have 600 quid.
Okay, since you don't have the money, I guess I'll...
No!
Look, here's £600.
Thank you. Pleasure doing business with you.
John Luca, how the fuck did he get in your house?
I came through the back door.
I should really lock my door.
Also, I forgot my toolkit, and I'm not a real TV repairman. Have a nice day.
You bastard! Anywho, these next two episodes are from the later, and overall better, designs of the characters. This episode is called Teddy Bear's Picnic from Season 4. This episode starts with Claude and Sadsack watching Florrie Fosdyke trying to remember what Mr. Grimes wanted in his coffee. Just then, Mr. Grimes tells Florrie to prepare 2 cups, as his mother's going to be bringing him a surprise. As this is a Season 4 episode, the other dolls are in the treehouse. Taking longer than usual, Claude and Sadsack come back with nothing, saying that they'll try again later.
We can try again later, n'est-ce pas?
Back at the factory, Mr. Grimes is greeted by his mother and the vicar's wife. We never actually see the vicar in the show, however, but Mr. Grimes' mother hands his son a carrier bag, and inside was his old, long-lost teddy bear, Old Edward, which couldn't help but bring a smile to Mr. Grimes' face. Old Edward isn't actually named in the episode, but he is in the next episode. Meanwhile, the Raggy Dolls tried again at checking the canteen, but Florrie Fosdyke was busy cooking, so they opted for biscuits they had in the treehouse and played hide and seek until the factory whistle went off.
And so, the Raggy Dolls had biscuits for lunch and played hide and seek all afternoon until they heard the factory hooter.
There's Thomas.
Once all the staff had gone home, the Raggy Dolls decide to have a late picnic inside the canteen, where they hear the snoring of Old Edward, who was supposed to be taken home by Florrie, but if you know anything of her character, you know she probably took a sack of flour home instead. Not wanting to be rude, they invite him to join their picnic, where he regales them of stories from Mr. Grimes' youth, or as he's known to Edward, as Oswald, including his experiences during World War II.
Well, if you say during the war, I'm going to pour this cup of tea right over your head.
Wait, hold the phone. World War II? Fucking hell. First a name drop of an actual place in London, then animal abuse / cruelty, now World War II? Whatever can the Raggy Dolls mention next?
How can anyone think the world was flat?
Calling out flat earthers in 1994? Fucking hell, this show was ahead of its time. Is there anything I'm missing?
The Scots fighting the English, the French Revolution, the invention of the steam engine, Napoleon and the Battle of Waterloo, the Industrial Revolution.
The bite of 87?
A gin and orange, lemon squash, and a scotch and water pea!
Human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria. Enough, I get the point.
Anyway, we learn that Old Edward was left on a train and was given to an orphanage, which is why he looks so tattered and beaten up. The Raggy Dolls offered to fix him up, and then that's literally the end of the episode. No word of a lie, I was expecting more from this episode, especially at the end, as it just feels like there's a whole bunch of content missing from it. Overall, this episode is crazy, but also boring at the same time. All it's leading up to is the dolls having an indoor picnic and meeting what would soon be a rather crucial character in the series. The mentioning of the war was completely out of nowhere, but it does serve for some lore and also wants you to have the impression that this is something only the parents will understand. But still, having the war is kinda heavy. But overall, this is still a rather boring episode.
In my opinion, this episode is extremely wholesome, but also extremely boring. It's not just a lovely introduction to Old Edward, but also a nice recollection of Mr. Grimes' backstory, how the two were best friends during the Blitz and how they grow old together only for them to be separated by a simple mistake. However, this episode didn't seem to catch my attention unlike the previous two. Maybe it's because I'm getting older, or maybe it's because the atmosphere of this episode was calm and I thought there wasn't really any significance in the plotline. Yes, I know it's a calm show with no action, explosions, violence, gore. Oh wait. Yes, oh, lovey-dovey, I have nothing else to say, but the war is now canon in the Raggy Dolls universe. No shade by the writers there.
I think for an episode delving into the backstory of Mr. Grimes in his early years, there could have been a lot more to the story of the relationship between him and Edward. The way his love for Edward is described and how they are always together doesn't quite make sense when you find out how he straight up ditches him on a train. Not to mention, how the hell did they even find him after all that time in the first place? It's just all very questionable. It just seems like clumsy exposition and hardly tells us about Mr. Grimes as a person. If anything, they should have used Edward as an influence towards Mr. Grimes as becoming a toy manufacturer, and how his reasoning for not getting rid of the Raggy Dolls is because he cherishes all his creations. But, you know, gotta make Hitler canon, I guess.
Now, the last episode is called Lucy's Greenhouse from Season 8.
Greenhouse?
Yeah, one of the lost episodes, but don't worry, we have been working on a big archive of the whole series, all available on Internet Archive. As of the time I'm recording this, we've denied the offer from ITV of Seasons 5 and 6 because it cost over £500.
We haven't actually got £4,000, have we?
But we nearly have the entirety of season 8.
What happened to the rest of it?
The damage was done. Good.
In this episode, 2 slugs named Wally and Eric are nibbling away at Lucy's lettuces. This little kitchen garden of Lucy's was seen in previous episodes, most notably the Peter Hale series, but it was never the main focus. But continuing with the episode, the next morning Lucy finds her lettuce leaves gone, so Back to Front comes up with the idea of building a homemade greenhouse for Lucy.
While the Raggy Dolls help make the greenhouse, Sad Sack is given the job of looking for stones, to which he discovers the 2 slugs who refuse to move from their spot.
I'm very sorry, said Sad Sack, but you'll have to find somewhere else, because I have reason to believe that you have been nibbling at Lucy's lettuces. That's why.
What's that I spy? Sad Sack making sense for once. I mean, you may think this is a small thing, but this is what we call good character development. I said good, not perfect.
Yeah, but he still could have squashed them.
2 kids gon' die tonight!
Missing his opportunity to end the episode early, Sad Sack returns to the rest of the Raggy Dolls to finish the greenhouse. Upon realising how hot the day is, they decide to take a sail on the river, leaving Lucy behind to do some planting.
Whilst working on the greenhouse, the hot weather starts to make Lucy feel all dizzy and, in her own words, queer.
Oh my, she thought. I do feel queer.
She sits down, and that's when shit really starts to happen. Lucy shrinks to the size of a yogurt pot and is greeted by a caterpillar that's literally a cat. A bunch of runner beans come marching towards her and a dandelion starts talking to her and wait a minute, what the fuck is going on? So apparently the Raggy Dolls can have fever dreams?
Good morning, my dear. How are you? Sorry I can't stop to chat. My house is on fire.
Okay, that was genuinely a good line. I'll give you that. But suddenly, as Lucy turns around, she sees the 2 slugs slithering slowly towards her.
Keep away! Keep away!
She wants us to keep away. Come on, Eric. I'll race you to her. Last one, there's a...
No! Yelled Lucy, and everything went dark.
As light emerges, we see Dottie, Princess and Back to Front surrounding Lucy as Dottie wipes her face with a cold flannel. Of course Lucy was dreaming and she passed out before the 2 slugs could get to her, and the episode ends with Lucy saying she'll make a special garden for all the pests so that they can nibble away as they please. To start off, I'd like to say that Sad Sack is extremely clever in this episode, which is a contrast to his character as seen in the scene where he finds the slugs and berates them for eating Lucy's lettuce. The heatstroke scene where Lucy nearly boils to death absolutely kills me. I mean, she was as tall as a yogurt pot! And it's wholesome how much the other dolls care for her at the end. I wish there were more moments in the show just like this one.
This is a weird episode for me. On the one hand, it's great to see it after it being lost for so long, and we see how the character designs have developed in the later seasons. But on the other hand, this episode feels like a what have we got left to talk about kind of feel. Yes, it's interesting that Lucy has a passion for gardening and the development of that with the greenhouse, but I feel the side story with the slugs and that obvious acid trip was unnecessary and could have been centered around just Lucy developing her garden as a lesson for better eating and doing it yourself, and reserved those stories for another episode entirely. But aside from that, it's okay.
Honestly, this is probably my favourite episode of the 4 we've watched. It's a nice change to have an episode focused on one of the dolls rather than all of them. Hell, Hi-Fi didn't even speak a word in this episode. The whole dream sequence was quite something. You could tell from that scene that the production team were having fun with all the weird visuals they had for this episode. If there's one element in this that I wish they kept, it's the little garden for the pests as a bit of continuity in the show. It would have been a nice little touch. But overall, whilst being one of the more simpler episodes, it's a really enjoyable one. So, that was the Raggy Dolls. What conclusions can we draw from this show? I'll let you 2 go first, as you 2 are technically going into this on rewatch.
I would genuinely recommend this show, especially to a younger audience. However, I wouldn't recommend the first 2 seasons to a small audience, as I feel as if they are more darker and intended for older children. Not just because of the themes that they cover, but also because of how terrifying the animation style is. The older seasons feel like they are more tender towards preschool children. I prefer the later animation myself. There will never be another show like the Raggy Dolls. It had its charm and now it lies in the legacy pits of our childhoods and for nostalgia purposes. I'm so glad I had a hyperfixation with this show, and I'm glad I discovered it and loved it for its charm. Neil Innes was truly a blessing to us all.
I'm happy to say my grandchildren like this too, you know, so this is what, 20 years on, you know. I can tell they like it. They're not just sucking up to me, you know, they actually sit glued to it. This is 2011.
Despite growing up with this and revisiting it several times over my life, it still confuses me how this has the amount of seasons it does, and at the same time could be so forgotten in history and to the general public. Of course, the Raggy Dolls is no standout series, and its ideologies on promoting positive views on individualism is kinda shadowed by the wacky hijinks and teamwork aspect. But to me, it's an all-round innocent and enjoyable series, and has something for any child looking for that escapism. Especially with the variety of characters that you can relate to at least one of them, whether you're a happy-go-lucky princess, an anxious Lucy, or a general bitch Dottie. There is plenty to pick from that makes this a good program.
So, what do I think of the Raggy Dolls? From only starting to watch this back in February, I didn't expect myself to be so invested in the show. The animation, whilst rather strange, has a very appealing look to it. Well, at least from season 3 onwards.
It's hideous! Oh, that's not very nice. It's just a dunk.
The stories are simple, but they do have a sense of engagement to them, as the 10-minute runtime, for the most part, is handled well. But the thing that stood out most about this show for me is definitely the characters. I just love how united they all are. Yes, even Claude, who despite pisses me off all the time, is probably my favourite character. Well, alongside Sadsack, who I say is the main reason I kept watching the show because he's such a mood at times.
I only want to be happy.
Another reason I love the Raggy Dolls is how it isn't trying to compete with other kids shows. It's very much trying to be its own thing. Now obviously the concept of a talking toy isn't anything new. Sure, you have your Toy Stories and your Forgotten Toys and Johnson and Friends if you're an Aussie. But those came out after the Raggy Dolls. But holy shit, I need to take the time to talk about Raggedy Ann and Andy. First released in 1977, this may be one of the first films to tackle the subject of talking toys. And oh my god, I have never seen anything with more smoother animation than this. This whole scene was animated by one person. This shit rivals Disney's work. And before you start saying in the comments, yes, I already know, Didi Con is the voice of Raggedy Ann.
Here's the really big news. Our little Marcella is 7 years old today.
When watching this for the first time back in June, there were quite a lot of things that I picked up on that could have led to inspiration for the Raggy Dolls. Like how Raggedy Ann looks a little bit like Lucy, Babette is a French doll, which could have led to the idea of Claude, and hell, that one French doll that Claude stumbles across in the Trouble with Claude episode is also named Babette. And who knows, that could have been a little reference to Raggedy Ann. But honestly, this incredible piece of film is definitely worth covering another day. But back to why I love the Raggy Dolls. What made this show stand out to me was that if you compared it to the shows made in America released around the time, like Transformers, G.I. Joe and He-Man, they were made to sell toys, while this is focused on toys, getting into rather strange scenarios. And the final reason I love the Raggy Dolls is the message of the show. Some of us may be different and we may have some things that are not right with us, but we're all together. It's even said in the intro of the show. If there's one criticism I have with this show, and it goes back to what we said at the beginning of the video, I don't think it deserved as many episodes as it did. And if the show had lasted like 2 or 3 seasons, I think it would have been fine. 4 would have really been pushing it. But over 9 seasons with 112 episodes just leaves you with the same question. Especially since this show barely had any merchandise, and nowadays it's extremely difficult to find actual dolls of the characters. What the bloody hell is that? I want to briefly go over the season 9 episode, The Eyes of Rami. Not in terms of an episode look over for all of us, but more of a quick look at the ending of the episode. So basically during the honeymoon saga, the Raggy Dolls are in Egypt, and they find the Eyes of Rami, and they're given one wish. And they all make the same wish to be back in the reject bin. And the ending narration states this.
The Raggy Dolls had all wished for the same thing. Just to be themselves again. No matter how imperfect.
This episode really could have been the finale to the show. But no, it has to go on for another 4 episodes, and end with an episode literally called Bored. Are you fucking kidding me?
Rupert the Roo.
Not you again.
But that seriously is my only major gripe I have with this show. Do I recommend it? I'd say yes. But start with something from the Peter Hale series, aka seasons 7 to 9, as I feel like those episodes have the most going on in them. But overall, I was really surprised to form such an attachment to the series. But I'm pretty sure there's something that we could all agree on.
What's that?
The theme song still kicks ass.
Oh yes, definitely.
Very true.
I agree.
Rat shit, bat shit, dirty old twat. 69 assholes tied in a knot. Hooray! Lizard shit, fuck! Rat shit, bat shit, dirty old twat. 69 assholes tied in a knot. Hooray! Lizard shit, fuck!
Raggy dolls, dolls like you and me. Raggy dolls, made imperfectly. Raggy dolls, happy just to be. Raggy dolls, dolls like you and me. All together now. Raggy dolls, dolls like you and me. Raggy dolls, made imperfectly. Raggy dolls, happy just to be. Raggy dolls,
This is Neil Innes saying, look after one another, and bye for now.